Hey guys, welcome back to the Horror Metal channel. My last video, I did a re-review of an early video I did on this channel. I reviewed Killers by Iron Maiden. It was a re-review, and so I figured I'd re-review another early album review that I did on this channel, like 6 years ago. South of Heaven by Slayer. That's right. South of Heaven by Slayer. Gonna redo my previous episode. I set that video to private and because it wasn't very good. So hopefully I'll do better this time. So let me know in the comments. Yeah. So basically, released in 1988. This was their fourth album, and like I always say, their first 5 albums I think are by far their best. They're nearly flawless, just thrash metal perfection at its finest. Now, a lot of people don't like this one nearly as much as their first 3, and yeah, I agree, it is weaker than the previous 3, and maybe even the one after it. I think I do prefer Seasons of the Abyss to this one overall, but it's still very, very, very damn good. And, let me start by saying that the reason this album is usually regarded as being a step down from Slayer's previous efforts is probably because most metalheads during that era were expecting something faster and more aggressive after the extremely heavy and relentlessly brutal Rain and Blood, their previous album, and probably their highest regarded. Let's face it, that album was basically the incarnation of destruction. Straightforward, neck-breaking thrash metal chaos that would be especially hard to top. So I actually kind of think Slayer did the right thing with this follow-up, South of Heaven, which is a little slower paced and more melodic, and doomier, but sadly, people apparently wanted Rain and Blood Part 2, I guess, because, which is why this one gets, somewhat unfairly maligned. People do regard this as one of their best, but, a lot of people think that, it's not as good as the, first 3, which I agree it's not, but it's still very, very good, and it shouldn't be overlooked because of that. But keep in mind that, just because this album isn't quite as fast and heavy as its predecessor does not mean it is still not full of evil as hell riffs and violence unleashed in all directions. I especially really appreciate the haunting and uneasy tone of this album and find the eerie atmosphere set up by the opening track to be a somewhat refreshing approach to their already sophisticated musical style. That's right, I said it. This album is quite possibly more intelligent than the previous 3 uncompromising releases. When the listener first puts on this record and the beautifully sinister intro riff, which is very fun to play on the guitar, by the way, the title track, the opening riff, once that starts playing, you might be reminded of the more slower, more doom-ridden sound of bands like Black Sabbath, albeit a much heavier version, of course. The dark and almost ominous feel of this album can best be described as the aftermath of an apocalypse after the unrelenting carnage has ceased. And I suppose that that means the previous album was the actual sound of the apocalypse, which is certainly fitting. So, while this prism of 80s extreme metal, filled with sick tempo changes and atonal solos, doesn't quite live up to the brutally hateful onslaught of past efforts, it's still quite enjoyable to listen to. At least they stayed more consistent and loyal to their sound than other thrash acts, such as, say, Metallica and Anthrax, which aren't even comparable. Dual lead guitarists Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman are top-notch, as always, and are most likely some of my favorite axemen in all of thrash metal. I can't, that twin axe attack that they have, just so furious and just so venomous and vile and wonderful. I can't come up with riffs that demonic and murderous in my head, let alone try to pick them out of my guitar, the solos are also spectacular, with King's being a little more sloppy, but still furious as hell, and Hanneman's having a little more classically structured, kind of melodic, intricate sound. Two different styles, but both an equally amazing contribution to Slayer's pristine Armageddon-like sound. So Dave Lombardo is my favorite drummer of all time. His fast as hell, powerfully aggressive beating on the drum kit is like a machine gun, blasting your whole world apart. Oh yeah, there he is. Dave Lombardo, my favorite drummer of all time. Yeah, his superb and unmatched drumming skills are the perfect complement to the insanely speedy guitars, instrumental perfection at its finest. You know, just imagine if somebody with the talents of Lombardo were to have been on Metallica's first few thrash albums, instead of the mostly uninspired, kind of boring techniques of Lars Ulrich. Although his drumming was pretty kick-ass on those 3 albums, I have to admit. You know, I'll give him credit where credit's due, but he can't compare to Lombardo, that's for sure. So next we have Tamaria's vocals. There he is, Tamaria, the bassist and vocalist. I think his vocals did get kind of worse as time went on, just gradually, with each album, just, you know. Don't get me wrong, he's still an excellent thrash singer, and I don't mean any disrespect, but on the first 3 albums, especially Show No Mercy and Hell Awaits, the first 2, he truly was the voice of hell, and just sounded like a pissed-off, howling demon. You know, his vocal style has since been reduced to kind of just generic yelling, but he still shines on this album and the one right after it. I just kind of wish he had done more of those high-pitched screams and deeply demonic growls that he showcased before, instead of just, you know, the shouting that he'd kind of later be known for. His bass playing is adequate as well, and, you know, I'm glad he started contributing to the lyrics more and more as time went on. So speaking of lyrics, the themes found most prominent on South of Heaven are just what you'd expect from Slayer, you know, pain, torment, Satan, you know, anti-religion, afterlife, war, serial killers, death, really dark, meaningful topics, delightfully intriguing topics, in which I'm usually quite obsessed with most of those as well. So now on to the songs. There are a lot of great songs on this album, some reminiscent of the classic Slayer and others more in vogue with the kind of newer style that Kerry King and company have brought to fruition on this recording. The brooding title track is actually one of my favorite metal songs ever, you know, especially during the band's golden age. Also, Silent Scream and Ghosts of War seem like they could have been recycled from Rain and Blood, which is a good thing, you know, it's a compliment. You know, only with slightly more defined riff work. Among the more intricate and politically motivated songs is Mandatory Suicide. I've always been a huge fan of the song Dissident Aggressor by Judas Priest, and Slayer does a remarkable job covering it here. So it also shows the vocals clashing a bit as Ariah's almost monotone yells do fall short of Halford's nimble notes, of course, but it still gets the job done. You know, and so as things draw to a fearsome close, the lasting impression on the album could be that while, you know, it does fall short of emulating the intensely in-your-face, gut-wrenching style found in the records that came before, it should still rank up there as one of thrash metal's finest albums ever released. So the next album, Seasons in the Abyss, is, in my opinion, the perfect balance between the band's earlier, more insane style found on the first 3 records and the slower pace, more melodic sound found on this one. So check out South of Heaven if you want to hear Slayer's more doom-ridden, hauntingly melodic side. But if you're expecting something as fast, as aggressive, and violent as Rain and Blood, prepare to be disappointed. But know that you'll definitely find this one most enjoyable as well. At least I hope so. So yeah, that's South of Heaven by Slayer. I think hopefully I made a good argument as to why this one should be highly recommended and worth checking out. And plus, Kerry King had hair back then, so if you don't like this album, Kerry King had hair. Your argument isn't valid. Yep. Freaking Slayer! Alright guys, well, that was my review of South of Heaven by Slayer. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments below, and until next time, I'm Hellhound. Thank you for watching the Horror Metal channel. Later.